Brice Sensabaugh has been on a heater from the three-point line. Tonight was no different in Charlotte. Let's talk about it.
Jazz Smack, your source for information and analysis about the Utah Jazz and NBA basketball. Jazz Smack is a community for passionate Utah Jazz NBA fans.
So Brice has played really well in terms of shooting the ball from the three-point line in recent weeks. Over the last 10 games, Brice is shooting 60% from three. And obviously, the more time Brice gets, the better he typically plays. He's a rhythm player, and he's a rhythm shooter. And when he's shooting well, the rest of his game typically is elevated as well. So Brice has played as good as he probably has in a Jazz uniform up to this point over the past couple of weeks. Now tonight, obviously, the Jazz, the team with statistically the worst record in the NBA right now, and Charlotte, statistically the third worst record in the NBA right now, and they were both both teams were sitting all sorts of players, trying their best not to win this game, in all honesty. But still, Brice shot the ball really well on the road, as he has in recent games, and that's great to see. That's one of the things we want to see from Brice. We want to see him shoot the ball well at both home and on the road, and he certainly fulfilled that tonight. He shot the ball better than anybody else on the team. He had a really nice game, and it's just great to see. What we want to see is still improvement from Brice, especially on the defensive end. On the offensive end, not only is he a good three-point shooter, his mid-range game is pretty good as well. But on the defensive end, we want to see improvement. The Jazz obviously are not a good defensive team. They need defenders, and Brice right now is not an average defender. He's below that, and we want him to get as close to average as possible, which will allow him to get more meaningful minutes in actual games that matter. I mean, right now, obviously, the Jazz aren't trying to win games. They haven't been trying to win games this entire year. This is the first year of the 3 Will Hardy years that the team has actually absolutely tanked it from the beginning, and that was the strategy. And we see that fulfilling at this. We see that strategy playing out at this point. It is what it is. But on the other hand, we still want to see from individual players, we want to see improvement. And I think Brice has certainly showed that lately. But again, what we really want to see now, can he do it on the defensive end as well? And I think some off-season conditioning and dropping a few more pounds. I mean, on the ESPN website, he's listed at 235 right now. I don't know if he's 235 or not, but I'd still like to see him a bit lighter than he is. It would help him in his quickness on both ends of the court. And especially on defense, it would help him. I mean, he's listed as 6'5", and it would certainly help him guard guys if he could just move his feet a little bit better. And that's what I'm hopeful that off-season workouts, the off-season conditioning, he's able to get a bit leaner. I mean, Brice is not ever going to be a 200-pound player. I'm not asking him to be that. I don't think anybody wants him to be that. But he needs to fall somewhere between the 220, 225 range, I think would be acceptable. And I don't think he's there right now. I don't know if he's 235 or not, but he's certainly not 220. I mean, I think Hayward, when he got to the Jazz, was like 215 at 6'7". Brice is listed as 6'5" at 235. That's obviously a little bit heavy. I'd just like to see him lose a few more pounds. Those are my thoughts on Brice. The other standout from tonight's game, in my opinion, Collier had a really nice game. He didn't get a ton of assists, but he got enough assists that it was positive. He shot the ball reasonably well, and he played overall a good game. And I thought he and Brice were the two bright spots in the lineup tonight. Keontae scored a lot of points, but he shot 7 for 20 from the field. He shot the most field goal attempts on the team, and obviously 7 of 20, again, is not a good shooting percentage. So I'm not going to include him in those two. And Kyle also shot 6 for 16 tonight, and he had such a poor first half that he really put himself into a hole. I mean, at halftime, he was 0 for 8 from the field. But in the second half, obviously, he shot 6 for 8, which is a lot better second half. And it's nice to see somebody bounce back after so many struggles in that first half. So I also thought that was a positive from Kyle's standpoint. Like to see him bounce back, and he did. He fought through a tough half, came back in the second half, and he corrected some things, shot the ball better, and things went more his way. And he also rebounded the ball really well again tonight, leading the team in rebounds. So, but again, he's the tallest guy on the Jazz team right now. The backup center is Oscar Tshiebwe, and Oscar's obviously not a center, as Kyle's not a center. Neither one of those guys is centers, but Kyle is clearly significantly taller than Oscar. I don't know what Oscar is listed at, but to me, he looks like he's 6'8". That's what he looks like to me. I don't even know if he was at the pre-draft combine where they measured him out. I have no idea. He obviously has long arms, but in terms of actual height, he's not tall, and he's certainly not an NBA center. Really undersized. But again, the Jazz aren't trying to win this game. The team, the lineup on the floor, whatever lineup Will Hardy puts on the floor, the goal needs to be for those guys to play as well as possible. But what the Jazz can do to obviously facilitate all these losses is to put lineups on the court that are unlikely to win no matter how they play. And that's what the Jazz have been doing. They've been manipulating the lineup with having guys sit out and everything. And so they've just been in a situation where you're going into Charlotte and you're playing against the third worst team in the NBA, and Charlotte is also sitting a whole bunch of guys. Jazz have to sit guys too in order to facilitate that loss. I mean, they can't play Walker. They can't play Lowry. I mean, they have to sit these guys. They can't play John Collins. They have to sit these guys. There's no way they can go into Charlotte and win that game. But on the other hand, like I said, the players that do play, you want them to play as well as they can. And that's why you need to still coach them and coach them to try and win the game. You can't tell the guys who are playing to lose the game. That's not the way. That would be a terrible pathway in terms of building a culture. That's kind of like what Houston was doing the previous few years, and that was ugly. I don't want to see ever the Jazz in that situation. Heck, I'm not even going to watch those games. I didn't watch any of those Houston games when they were just running out Jalen Green and letting him run all over the place and shoot whatever shot he wanted. I mean, those were some really ugly games. And I hope the Jazz never go that route. And they certainly haven't this year. I'm not going to say they have done anything like that, but they've certainly manipulated their lineups where, by playing those lineups, they can facilitate losses, and they can dictate the lineups depending on who they're playing, where they're playing, etc. And these last few games, the Jazz have now 6 games remaining. So these last few games, the Jazz are going to be in a situation where they're going to have to look at where they're playing and who they're playing and what incentives there are for their team they're playing. So it depends on, is the team they're playing still playing for playoff position, or are they in a situation where they are no longer playing for playoff position and they're going to just rest their guys for the playoffs? So that's something that the Jazz are going to have to navigate these final 6 games, because obviously right now the Jazz are tied with the Wizards for the fewest wins in the NBA, and statistically the Jazz are in the number 1 spot just because they've played more games and they have more losses than Washington. But that key number is the number of wins. And right now, the Jazz and Washington Wizards are tied for the fewest wins. And therefore, I mean, the Jazz want to get that number 1 spot in terms of fewest wins. That's the goal. And it's very likely that the Jazz and Washington end up with the same record at the end of the year, and then it goes to a coin flip. And that's certainly better than being in that number 2 position. You got to give yourself the best odds and limit your downside. If they get that number 1 position, they limit their downside to having the 5th pick in the NBA. And if they go to that number 2 position, it goes to the 6th pick. So you don't want to fall out of that number 1 spot. You want to give yourself the opportunity to win that coin toss, and get that number 1 draft position, even though you have no better chance than the number 2 position at getting Cooper Flagg, but it limits your downside in terms of the 5th or 6th pick. So right now, the Jazz are certainly playing for one of those 2 picks. They're going to be first, or they're going to be second. Charlotte now has 3 more wins on the season than the Jazz, and so the Jazz are obviously not going to win half their remaining games. So it'll either be number 1 position or number 2 position at the end of the year going into the draft, and we'll see what happens. But anyway, let's go take a quick look at the box score from tonight, and see where things stand. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because, quite frankly, it doesn't really matter a whole lot at this point. These last few games have not been exactly the most thrilling of Jazz games, and the final 6 are also not going to be the most thrilling of Jazz games. But what you can watch for is individual improvement, individual play, certain moves that they are working on, and can they implement those moves in real-time game action and things like that. But overall, like I said, Brice and Isaiah both shot 6 for 11 tonight. So Brice scores 19, Isaiah scores 17. Isaiah also has 7 assists, 3 steals, 1 block, and 4 turnovers. So the assist-to-turnover ratio is not great, but he did get the 7 assists in 32 minutes of playing time, and the 3 steals is also a really good number. And Brice also had 3 steals, 5 assists, only 1 rebound, which is a surprise because Brice has been rebounding the ball really well. But the 5 assists and 3 steals, those are really good numbers for Brice. And Brice had also no turnovers. And Brice also shot 5 for 10 from 3. So 10 of his 11 field goal attempts were from the 3-point line. And he made his only 2-point field goal. So he ended up at 6 for 11. So those are really the 2 standouts in terms of the box score. And like I said, Kyle started out the game at halftime. He was 0 for 8 from the field. And then he ends up 6 for 16 from the field. So he makes 6 of 8 field goal attempts in the second half. Now, he only made 2 of 8 threes, but those 2 threes he obviously made were in the second half. And then he also had the 13 rebounds and 2 assists and 1 turnover. So Kyle overall, his second half was certainly vastly improved over his first half. And like I said, I like to see a bounce back. You really have some struggles in the first half. Then you regroup at halftime. You come out and say, okay, I'm going to play better. And he certainly did that. And that's what especially with the young guys, you want to see, you don't want to see a really bad first half where the ball just didn't go in, things didn't go your way, impact your entire game. And this is something that I hope to see with all players, but especially the young guys. You're not going to allow a half of basketball, a really poor half of basketball, impact your entire game. So Kyle didn't do that tonight, and that's great. So those are the standouts from my standpoint of the box score. Johnny also shot the ball really well tonight. 5 for 10 from the field, 2 for 5 from 3, 2 rebounds in 19 minutes of play. So he didn't play a whole lot, but he shot the ball in the time that he did play and the field goal attempts that he got. So he did get quite a few field goal attempts for only playing 19 minutes. But he also scored 12 points. The only other thing I'm going to mention is Keontae. So Keontae shot the most shots on the team tonight with 20 field goal attempts. He made 7 of those. He went 3 for 10 from 3, 3 for 3 from the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal. Keontae, again, his field goal percentages this year have not been good. So I think the process for him becoming a better shooter is simply taking better shots. I think that's going to be a lot of it for the years going forward. I mean, he's only in year 2, so he can certainly improve from here on the offensive end in terms of shot selection and which shots are good shots, which shots are bad shots. But again, a lot of that it's both on Keontae and it's on Coach Hardy. What is he telling Keontae what are good and bad shots? You hope that he's instilling in him what are good shots, and that Keontae will get better at that over time. But so far, his first 2 years, his field goal percentages are about exactly the same. There really is no meaningful difference between how he shot in his rookie year last year to how he shot in his second year this year. It's about the same. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens next year. And I don't foresee Keontae being moved or anything. I don't think he's going to be part of any trade package. I think that he'll be on the team next year. And so there are some guys on the team this summer that I would expect the Jazz to look to move, some of the more veteran players on our team. But Keontae is obviously not that guy, and I don't think he has enough, value on the open market right now to really bring anything in return, so the Jazz aren't going to trade him. So we'll see. Even though he's obviously coming off the bench right now. He's been coming off the bench for a long time. He's not playing the second half of this year. He hasn't been playing starting point guard because that's been given to Isaiah, and Isaiah is obviously more of a point guard than Keontae is. Keontae is a combo guard, and Isaiah is clearly simply a point guard. He's not a 2 guard. He's not a combo guard. He's a point guard. He's a point guard that needs to improve his shooting this offseason. We'll see what happens with 6 games left. We'll see what happens between the end of this season and Summer League and see how he looks. And I'm interested to see if Collier actually changes his mechanics where I can see a meaningful change in his mechanics. Now, is he going to do that? I don't know. I hope he does. I hope he gets with one of the Jazz coaches or a specified shooting coach and actually changes his mechanics in a way that it's visibly changed. We'll see if he does that. I think that would help him, and I think that's the best thing for him to do. And working on that now rather than trying to improve through repetitions of what he's currently doing and hoping for improvement that way. I would like to see him actually change some of his mechanics now and then try and put in repetitions with better mechanics. That's what I would like to see, rather than just not changing the mechanics and going through a bunch of repetitions, hoping that helps him. I don't think that's the way to go. I want to see him change his mechanics and a bunch of repetitions with better mechanics. But we'll see what happens. I think obviously he's going to work hard on his shooting in the offseason. I think he knows that. The Jazz know that. The Jazz are going to stress that with him, and that'll be his primary focus in the offseason. More so than any other one thing is becoming a better shooter. So we'll see what happens between the end of the season and Summer League. I hope we see something different. But obviously, to become a great shooter, you don't just all of a sudden become a great shooter in a couple of months. It's going to take some time. All of us that spent countless hours in a gym, in a driveway, whatever, shooting the basketball, working on your craft, know that it takes time. It's not that there are no quick fixes. You look at somebody like Jason Kidd. It took him a number of years to become a competent three-point shooter. It was not it was a progression over years. It wasn't a progression over a couple of months. So, but we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. But anyway, the other thing is, if we look right now at the Tankathon standings, where things stand, like I said, the Jazz have 6 games left. And so right now, the Jazz are 16-60 record. Washington is at 16-59, and Washington is just absolutely hammered tonight. They just got blown out. And then with the win tonight, Charlotte moves to 19 wins. So right now, the Jazz are tied with Washington with 16 wins, and then Charlotte is 19 wins. So Charlotte is clearly out of reach of those other two teams catching them. Neither one of those other two teams are going to get 3 more wins this year. Jazz aren't going to get 3 more wins. Washington's not going to get 3 more wins. So it's going to finish in the final standings. Utah will be either 1 or 2 going into the lottery. And then we'll see what happens with the lottery. I mean, hopefully, the Jazz really do. I mean, I'm not a big fan of getting lucky, but the Jazz really do need to get lucky. That would be the best case scenarios. The Jazz actually get lucky and get that number 1 pick and actually go after Cooper Flagg and draft him. That's what the Jazz, that's the best case scenario. I don't know a whole lot else about the other players in this draft. I have not watched a lot of college basketball, and I don't know anything about the foreign players. I mean, you look at like this past draft, like all those foreign players from France and whatnot. I don't know who the foreign players are this year or anything they're about. And you obviously hear about the Ace Bailey and Dylan Brooks and Edgecombe. You hear about those guys. I've seen Edgecombe play a little bit. You know about those guys. I haven't watched them extensively to form an opinion as of this point. I have watched Cooper Flagg a little bit, and I'm going to definitely, for all those out there, Duke is playing Houston in the Final Four on Saturday. And that Houston team plays really tough defense, really physical defense, very aggressive defense. And that'll be a really good game to actually watch how Cooper Flagg responds to the physicality and the toughness that Houston brings to the defensive end of the court. And I want to see how Cooper Flagg responds to that. And I'm definitely going to watch that game. Now, with some luck, that'll give a good indication about the toughness of the kid. I think the kid's a tough kid, and he's shown all indications of that in the bit that I have watched of him. But it's going to be interesting just to see what happens with that game. Obviously, Duke has a huge size advantage over Houston, but the toughness and the physicality of that Houston team and the aggressiveness of that Houston team on the defensive end, I just want to see how Cooper Flagg responds to that. So it'll be interesting, and I encourage everybody out there to try and watch that game. I mean, it should be fun. So anyway, I think that's all I'm going to talk about tonight. Again, these games, I don't think you can't go into these last 6 games just like the past few and look at these games from a team standpoint and say, okay, how's the team playing? Because the team, at this point in the season, the team itself isn't going to be that valuable. There's going to be roster turnover again between the end of this year and next year. There's bound to be some of that. And the guys on the team now, obviously, when the Jazz are in a position to contend, the guys on the team now, only maybe 2 or 3 of those guys are going to be on the team at the point where the Jazz are in a position to contend. At the most, I'm saying 2 or 3 of the guys. That's my prediction. I mean, the Jazz are obviously in search. The reason why they have tanked, they're in search for a top 10 player. And that's what they want to fall into, a top 10 player. And that's hopefully what happens, regardless of whether or not they get the number 1 overall pick and pick Flagg. Hopefully, whatever pick they do get, they need some good fortune and get into one of those guys that has an opportunity to become a top 10 player. So again, look at the top 10 players. It's not necessarily the 1, 2, or 3 picks that become the top 10 players, like Giannis, Jokic. I mean, these guys were not the top 3 lottery picks. So you just need to but those 2 franchises were really fortunate And they picked those guys, and those guys became really, really good. And that's the luck that's kind of the luck that the Jazz really need right now. And I hate asking for good luck. I'd rather just be really good. But the Jazz are in a situation where some good fortune would certainly benefit them at this point. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, that's all for tonight. And we hope that you join us again on another post game. I know that we missed a couple of games, but we will certainly more than likely be here for a post game for the remainder of this year over the last 6 games. But anyway, we hope that everybody has a great night, and we will talk to everybody later. For those watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. And you can also follow us on X @JazzSmack. And we will talk to everybody later.